Good morning, Artificial Hearts family, live from Princeton, New Jersey. We are here for the premiere of The Hopeful. We are invited to a panel with executive producer Kevin Christensen, so do not miss out on this amazing program that we have for you tonight.
Media apparatus. Just first question for you here. My understanding is that you attended Southern University, correct? And so my question is, coming from a Adventist university, what inspired you then to go into the filmmaking industry, into the quote-unquote Hollywood, Babylon area, being a quote-unquote Daniel? What inspired you to go into that area, and what opportunities did you see there that maybe we don't tend to see?
Well, there wasn't exactly an Adventist film industry to go into. So I actually studied business when I was at Southern. So I started a live sketch comedy show, and that really is what got me interested in doing more creative arts mixed with business. And so I never planned on being a Daniel per se. I still feel a little weird even saying that, but neither did Daniel. It was like, hey, when that happened, found himself in a situation and learned the customs of the people and learned how to communicate with the people, so that then he could influence the people. I heard someone say they were talking about being able to contextualize things to modern audiences, especially post-Christian audiences or post-modern audiences. And they were talking about Joseph. And they said Joseph looked, sounded, smelled probably so much like the Egyptians that his own brothers couldn't recognize him. Wow. He was able to contextualize himself so well into the Egyptian economy and world that his own brothers couldn't recognize him, and yet he was able to use that position to influence people. And so when I graduated, I went to work in the film industry, and I saw, just how much culture is shaped by film and by storytelling. When you look back at even how Jesus influenced people, most of it was not sermons, it was stories. And I think that we really lost the power of storytelling as a church. Like, we used to be so in the forefront with it. We had, the Bible stories, the books that we were, lots of people see. I just got to see the new publishing houses, and then we got stuck on kind of just trying to reach the head instead of reaching the heart. And I think that there's an opportunity now to try and reach the head through the heart, through the power of storytelling.
And on that note, on the storytelling aspect, Kevin, I wanted to know, how was kind of the production process behind The Hopeful? How was this project kind of different than other projects that the church has produced, like Tell It to the World, or these kinds of biopics? And why is kind of storytelling so important for this project?
Yeah, so this project was very different because the church actually doesn't own this project. This was a very different model. So it came from a conversation one time. Actually, I was working at Tyler Perry Studios on a project, and I had worked on enough projects that I noticed a pattern in my paychecks. And they never said Netflix, they never said NBC Universal, they never said Hulu. And they were always these no-name LLCs, and I was like, what's up with that? So I made friends with accounting. Any job you work on, always make friends with the accounting department. They will be helpful to you later. And so I hung out with the accountants, and I was like, hey guys, what's up with this? We're like, I think it was like Peachtree Street Productions 2 LLC. Wow. And I was like, what is this? Because this is a collaborative project between MTV, the Dimension, and I think there was another company that was on board. And I was like, none of them, that's not their companies. And they said, oh, this is standard practice. They always open up a company, they put just enough money into it, and that way it limits the liabilities. And then they do the project, and then when it's done, they turn it back over to the studio. And I looked at how we were doing projects in the church, and I saw that we always had this in-house model. We bring everything in, we hire in-house, and if you're like Adventist enough to pass our HR department, then like we hope you have skills. And I was like, well, no wonder we're not able to do things on that level. If we did it with this model, not only could we do so much more, but we could also protect God's assets too.
Yes.
By limiting the liability into that separate company. So that was something that we did with this. This was actually one of the first for-profit and non-profit mixes when it gets into the financing of it that the church has ever done, where we have non-profit side through Hope Channel International, and we actually have a for-profit side with investors that invest in the project. And that way the missional oversight is there, but the business side is also there by it being separate. And we are told in Christ's Object Lessons, religion and business are one and the same. They are not two separate things.
Wow. Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, and then maybe just going off on that a little bit more, where do you see the future of kind of the entertainment industry heading? I think we're kind of noticing kind of a lot of like decentralization from that kind of Hollywood hub in LA, going to Austin, going to all these places, you have kind of podcasts, game on YouTube. What are kind of the challenges or the opportunities that you see for Seventh-Day Adventists, creatives and creators, to kind of, through stories, preach the hopeful message today?
Yeah, there are more opportunities now than I have ever seen for faith-based storytelling. There's an openness to it. There is, so it was interesting because 3 weeks ago I went to something called the Storytellers Conference. And the Storytellers Conference is where people like Angel Studios are there, Kingdom Story Company is there. A lot of really major Christian filmmakers come there, and there was a distributor there. And he was saying, we've been talking with all the different theaters that are across Middle America. And if you don't know this, most theaters are locally owned and operated, so it's a franchise model. So even though it may say AMC or Regal or Cinemark, there is a local theater owner that's operating it, and they're choosing what films they want to put in there. And he was saying that there's a lot of these community cinemas that may only have, let's say they have 4 screens. And if Sony comes in and says, hey, we have this kind of adult-oriented film, it's not family-friendly, it's very violent or sexual content or whatever, and they say you have to hold it on 2 screens for 3 weeks minimum, that theater owner is concerned because they know that their community is not going to bring a family of 4 to go see that movie, and that's going to tie up half of their screens for 3 weeks. So they said it's not even this war of oh, well, we want more Christian content or we want more family content. They're looking at their bottom line and they're saying what we're seeing from a demand from people is that they want family-friendly content. They want content that speaks to their values. So it's really interesting, when I read some of the articles that are talking about, the culture war, and then you actually get into the reality of what's happening on a business level. Even if you take out the culture war with it, you are hearing many theater owners saying our community wants value-based content. So there's more opportunity now than ever to do that.
You see a demand for that then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this year alone, I think we've had more faith films come out, and you've got several more that are about to come out. We've got Oppenheimer. Sorry, that's the other room. That's further down the hall. We have Bonhoeffer, which I've gotten the chance to see that, and I actually just set up a screening with the Adventist group in Europe. They have an event called GAIN, and just last night actually, they're going to be doing a screening over there for German and European churches there. So there's the Greatest Christmas Pageant Ever that's about to be coming out, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's coming out. So we're seeing more of that because there is a demand for it.
So Kevin, we wanted to ask you, from the missional aspect of the movie, essentially, where do we move on from here? In the film, you're talking about the great disappointment and the aftermath of that, and a group of people that were disappointed and yet turned that into hope. Here we are, almost 200 years later, as an Adventist community. What are we to be hopeful about today? Yes, the second coming, but how does it differ from the hope that you portrayed in the film? And in what ways is it the same?
That's a great question, because in many ways we are different. We're a much more established church than they were then, and yet at the same time there are a lot of opportunities for kind of a reawakening that can happen in our church, and I think that this is the generation that's going to be able to do that, because we're at this point. And if you just look at the numbers with the North American division, we're at this point where there's a lot of pastors that are actually past the point of retirement, and we're going to see this whole generation just retire or pass away all at once. And a lot of leadership positions are overnight going to start turning over. I've already been getting emails of, it's a lot of, unfortunately, it's not so much retirement as much as it's announcing the loss of one person after the other. The emails are more and more frequent with that. And so there's about to be this big generational shift when it comes to leadership. And this is our opportunity to start taking the reins, taking the mantle, and really changing the world around us, just like we saw 15, 16, 17-year-olds do then. We can do that. And most of us are in our 20s? So we're already behind the 8 ball, right? But in a lot of ways, we've got that opportunity to do that today. And so I'm very hopeful about where we're going, because I think that there's this reigniting of choosing to be here, choosing Adventism to be our faith, not because it was handed to us by our parents, but because it was something that we really found when we dove into the Word. And we line that up with the Bible, and as it mentioned in the film, it's the 10 Commandments, not the 10 suggestions.
Amen.
Amen.
Do we have time for maybe 2 questions from the audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd
I
love to.
think we'll quickly do that.
The opportunity.
The light is blinding me, but does anyone want to be a brave soul, and are there any questions from the audience that someone would like to ask Kevin? Maybe I just...
Stephen.
Final thoughts. Kevin, are you going to be with us for this whole
Yes,
weekend?
yeah, I will be here this weekend.
So there will be
But I also love to. There we go.
up,
Got it.
then.
Brave hand and back.
He doesn't need my, he has a booming voice.
How's it going?
It's going good. It's going good.
Awesome. Good stuff with the movie. I have a question. The question is, my understanding is that this movie was made in like 2 parts. So we had it released theatrically, but there was this other movie. So what was the development process like?
That is a fantastic question. So about 10 years ago, the Australian Union Conference said we should tell our story. And they put together like about $1 million or so to start production on our story, whatever that would become. The General Conference heard about it, they put in a few more million and kind of bought it out from under them, and of course with more money comes more committees. And pretty soon it was a number of historians and church administrators saying, you need to include this, you need to include that, you need to include this and that. It got to the point where they actually had listed so many people that the cast list was incredibly long. And if anyone knows about how actors are paid, if you have a name and you have a line, you have to be paid a Screen Actors Guild minimum, which these days it's about $1,000 a day. So plus residuals after that. So they came back and said, are you prepared for the budget that goes with all of these names? And then they went, oh, maybe not quite so much that. But it was that kind of process. And so it really went from telling it to the world to kind of telling it to ourselves. And I think that there's value in expanding a history that many Adventists have grown up hearing or learning and seeing that expanded. But 2.5 hours, I'll just be frank, you can't take that to cinemas. You can't take that to streaming platforms. It was too long for that, so they placed it on YouTube. And if you know how algorithms work, algorithms like to give you more of the same. So when we started talking with non-Adventists, most people had never heard of Tell the World, and also I think it was only sold in like ABCs. So yeah, so the director had held on to the rights for this, and because he had this hope that, no pun intended, but he had this hope that someday, then pun very intended, he was a hopeful man, and he hoped that someday, this would come to fruition. And actually, the process for him, it was very difficult when his initial vision, he felt like, was kind of taken away from him, and it really tried his soul a lot. He nearly left the church over it. Wow. But he hung on to it, and a number of years later, he was teaching at Southwestern Adventist University, and I met him there, and he told me this concept for his original plan, and I was like, oh wow, that sounds like a great movie. And at that point, I wasn't in a position to help him out, so I was just like, good luck. Hope it happens someday. And fast forward to about 2 or 3 years ago, I came into my position with Hope Studios, and I called him up and said, hey, do you still have the rights for that? Because I think it might be time. And we don't have all the time to talk about it right now, but there are so many things that happened between even when he was wanting to get the director's cut made and now, between him connecting with Jonas, who did all the music for it. Jonas is a multi-Grammy winning singer-songwriter. You can look up all the music for this, by the way. It's on Spotify, Amazon. Like, you can say, hey Alexa, play this, and it'll do it. He wrote, oh boy, now I'm going to blank on all the songs he wrote, but he's written a lot of very, very major worship songs that you would recognize. And if he tried to make it earlier, he would not have gotten the music involved. We would not have had the same colorist that did Elvis and The King for Netflix with Timothy Chalamet. That's why visually it even looks different. We got the same, I think, sound group that then went and did Furiosa after this. So like, there were so many people that he met along the way that it was very much God's timing. And if he had tried to rush this, we would not have what we have today. So that's kind of how it came together, and more miracles. I mean, there was stuff like at Disney Studios Sydney where they were mixing it, and they were using the small room and the big room. They came in one day and just said, hey, Furiosa had to push a few weeks. Do you guys want the big one? Like, we can't afford to turn the lights on in there. And they said, no, we're just going to give it to you and try it for the small one. So there were things like that along the way that just really helped it to come to be, that it was very clear that there was a guiding presence with this that I've never seen on any other project that I worked on.
Wow. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Is there another
question? One more.
Okay, we got a last question.
Yeah, last question.
Amelia?
Hi, thank you so much. What an incredible film. I wanted to ask about the process of casting for the film, because I know playing a historical real-life character is different, but especially if there are religious implications. So did the team start looking initially for like Christian or Adventist actors, and if they weren't even Christian at all, what was their motivation for wanting to be in the film?
That's a great question, and I was not involved in the casting process. Most of that was back when they were shooting all the initial footage, and so Kyle was responsible for that, and then he had a casting director that actually cast people. So the way that any process goes for casting is you have a casting director who will look over the descriptions of the characters, and then they'll put out a casting call that usually goes to agents or managers, or sometimes you have individual actors or actresses who represent themselves on a casting website. And then they'll start by looking at their headshots first and see, does this person look like the description that I'm reading on the page? Or in the case of a historical film, they do have reference photos that they can look at for that. Now, one of the things that was done with this film is it was shot up in Canada, because Canada has a very helpful tax incentive. We did all the post-production actually over in Sydney, Australia. So if anyone's interested in the details later, I can share with you the parable of the talents. of how we took our budget, we increased it through exchange rates, and then we got a 40% tax incentive from the Australian government, which nearly doubled. It was actually like I think it was 2.1x by the time, before we even started spending it. It was like we had taken that, leveraged all that to get 2.1 times what we initially had to work with. So they did that in Canada to be able to tap into that tax incentive so that they could leverage and expand, really just using the biblical principle of talents to use what budget that they had. Now, the problem with that is that it limited them to finding local talent in the area. So they were limited to having to find who was local in the area and then looking through their demo reels and their tapes. I will tell you that no one has looked for Adventist actors because there's not exactly a pool of Adventist actors and actresses, since we don't really teach that in most of our universities. But there was a lot of time spent, as I understand it, there was time spent talking with the different people that were involved in it. And it really, what I love about this is, hear me out on this. I'm adamant actually about working with as many non-Adventists and non-Christians as we can. I have been in charge, I've been a supervisor on a show before where we had 400 people on set a day. We actually had 2 shifts that were going nearly 24 hours a day. And I can tell you that the number of people actually influencing the script is probably like 3 people or 4 people. So, the lighting guy is not going to affect what's being said on the screen, even the camera guy. And so that is a whole opportunity of people that you can be witnessing to. And that you can, when they're in the editing bay and they're going over a scene about Sabbath, what conversations do you think they start having at lunch? Hey, so we're in this scene about Sabbath. We don't need to wait for the film to come out for the mission work to begin.
Amen.
Oh, okay. I was like, I can talk about that for a while, but it's, there's so many opportunities, even with the casting process with that, and it's been interesting hearing from some of the actors afterward how it affected them, and I've had a number of people ask, did Tommy, who played Ellen, did she convert to Adventism? Unfortunately, when Tell the World came out and it went on YouTube, the level of unchristian-like behavior that we saw in the comment section, and looking at, here's someone who, here the church had provided an opportunity for her and all the other actors to work on something that maybe didn't violate their conscience or wasn't full of a lot of other, content that we would disagree with. Here's an opportunity for us to give them something to do that is pure and upright and positive and all the attributes, fruits of the Spirit with it. And yet, people looked at all of her past, they looked at other projects she'd worked on, and said, how dare you bring someone in and give them this opportunity to do that? I mean, the level of hatred that was shown on there was, and she reads that. People go in the comment section and read this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, she did not join the Adventist church because people in the comment section made it clear she was not going to be welcome. And so I share that because I want us to really think about how we're treating people and what, how we are carrying ourselves online in these spaces. Whenever we have the opportunity to work with other people, instead of finding reasons to write them off, let's find reasons to bring them in and show Christ-like love, because the people that Jesus hung out with were all the people that the church wrote off.
Amen. Amen. Well, can we give Kevin another round of applause?
Great question.
So Kevin will be with us throughout the weekend. Kevin, how can people reach you?
You can just find me, I'll be walking around here. But also, I'm on Instagram. If you go to, if you just look up It's Kevin Instagram, I'm on there. That's the easiest way to find me. Also, if you enjoyed hosting this and you would like to do a hosting of it, sorry for some of you in the back that maybe heard me. I was actually recording a little promo video. She saw me back there. Because we're trying to get the word out that these kinds of events, this is possible. anyone can actually go and host an event like this. So you can go to just thehopefulmovie.com, and please follow us on social media. If you just look up The Hopeful Movie. You can also rent it online. If you go to The Hopeful Movie, everything's there. We also have some books that you can give away or you can purchase. And also, if you want to gift it to someone, you can do that too. So we have all those options available if you just go to thehopefulmovie.com.
All right. Sounds good. Let's give another round of applause.
Thank you.